The Tide 5.
The Tide 5, ladies and gentlemen. This is a feature we do every day on iOS. It's Only Sport. Martin Devlin, Lachlan Waugh. Yes, we are in France, and that is absolutely because of you, the generosity of you, our clients, our supporters, our sponsors, our listeners. 5 separate sporting topics, again, all based around what we're doing here, why we are here, the Rugby World Cup and these quarterfinals coming up this weekend. I want to ask about the Irish team announcement today, Loch. Only 2 changes to their team, both of them on the bench. What does this say, the consistency of selection that they are doing and that we just haven't been able to get together for longer than the last season, maybe a couple of years from now? If we beat Ireland, are we officially over the Wayne Barnes forward pass in 2007? Remember, the Englishman is going to be reffing this quarterfinal this weekend. New Zealand media outnumbered 4-5, maybe 6-1 at the Irish team announcement today. What does that mean? Many of the questions put to the Irish players, captain and coach, were around aura and invincibility, and the fact that that balloon has been well and truly pricked for teams all over the world now facing this particular All Black side. And finally, this is the first time it has happened in 8 years for Northern Hemisphere sides versus 4 Southern Hemisphere sides in the quarterfinals. Who comes out on top, and what is that going to say and define for the next 4 years of international rugby? Let's kick it off with the Irish team announcement, and only a couple of changes to them. On the bench, injury enforced, of course. But this is something Justin Marshall has harped on about, Lachlan, when I say harped on, that's disrespectful to Justin. Justin has talked about this a lot. He has just banged the drum that he wanted to see an All Black side picked consistent selections, play the number 1 team. Ireland have done that right throughout this group stage. They have been adamant that, hey, put your best team out on the field, let them play together, get the combinations, get the cohesiveness going. Whether or not this takes a toll on them throughout the tournament, given the fact that if they get all the way to the final, I think they've played something like 7 maybe big-time test matches with this team. And do they have the legs? Do they have the fitness? Are they going to be, the same bunch of guys that end up playing at the business end of the tournament if they get past us? But you contrast that with the way that Ian Foster and his selectors have approached the whole season, where, we just haven't seen our top team on the field 2 test matches in a row. Who's got it right?
Oh, them. Without a doubt. I mean, you said it there, consistency in selections. When you know what your best team is, when you know what your best 15 is, and you're picking that team week in, week out, and they get game time. People have gone on a lot. We had a couple of people on the show saying, I think this was last week before we flew out. Maybe for Ireland, the fact that they're playing their A team consistently, they might run out of steam, and they won't be able to front up against the All Blacks. I don't think it's that at all. These are guys who are in peak physical condition. They play sport for a living, so when they're not playing a game, they're training and they're in the gym and they're eating well and they're drinking well, or not drinking in many capacities. So the ability to play week on week on week, and they do it during their club season as well, I'm sure. So for them to be able to pick that same side and roll them out again is brilliant. It's perfect. It's what you want. The All Blacks do the opposite. They rest guys. They do it during Super Rugby and then at the World Cup. I mean, think about that for a second. They were told during Super Rugby that they have to rest certain players. Coaches can't play guys for more than 4 consecutive weeks, and a whole lot of people got rested. We're like, okay, it's for the World Cup, but then the World Cup rolls around and they're still being rested.
No, it's just insane, isn't it?
Happened in 2007, didn't it?
I mean, look, and a lot of us just scratch our heads at this and go, here you go, ladies and gentlemen, this is Paris again. If you were listening to the show yesterday, the sirens are non-stop out on the streets. We're getting some actuality out here on the streets of Paris in the 10th arrondissement. But look, and this is the frustration. Look, if it works, Ian Foster is a genius. His selectors are genius. If it works. If it doesn't work, we're going to be asking these questions for years. What the hell is this about? I look at it constantly and think, your job is to play rugby. That means you are training every day, mostly during Super Rugby, and then you play 1 game a week. These teams that play the top European competitions, these guys are playing for 10 months. You're about to hear from Victor Vito, and that's exactly what he said.
And they play in multiple competitions. They have their domestic championship of sorts, and then they've got the Champions Cup. So it's like the Premier League when those teams have the Premier League and then the Champions League. It's like that. So they're playing a lot more rugby, and yet what a shock. The Northern Hemisphere teams, a lot of them are in pretty damn good form. France, Ireland, England have looked good at the World Cup. Wales have looked good. 4 Northern Hemisphere teams topping the pools. Maybe actually playing rugby is good for you to be prepared to then play rugby, as stupid as it sounds.
We've all had a lot of comments on the text line right throughout the year is, when the All Blacks have lost or when the All Blacks have underperformed in test matches so what was that thing about resting players during Super Rugby? How is that going to help when we are at the business end of the tournament in October in Paris? Well, we're about to find out this weekend. Invincibility and the aura of the All Blacks. I asked that question today at the presser because I'm really interested, fascinated as to what the response is. And Andy Farrell and Johnny Sexton are always going to be respectful. No one's going to give the opposition ammunition. They're not going to sit there and directly say, hey, we don't believe in that anymore. So, they talk about history, they talk about legacy, they talk about those things. But you could see it in their eyes and you could see it in their body language. That balloon has been well and truly pricked for that team and those guys. They have beaten the All Blacks 4 times out of 6. So, what this aura is about, I'll draw the parallel with my beloved Manchester United side. That team has no aura anymore. Old Trafford used to be a place where, when Alex Ferguson was the manager, teams would go along and think, if we get out of here with a 2-0 loss, we've actually done quite well. These days, everyone goes there thinking, we're going to take 3 points off you. And that's what I believe every team playing the All Blacks now is thinking, hang on, you might have dicked us for the last 100 years, but that's those guys. Yeah. That's Buck Shelford, that's Sean Fitzpatrick, that's those guys. Yeah. That's not you. And even your McCaws and your Carters, that's those guys. You lot, this team, you don't have that. And that's, again, based on fact and based on results. And I think this really counts for a lot because psychologically, when you used to go onto the field and play the All Blacks, you talk to past All Blacks, they could see it in the eyes of the opposition that they were almost beaten before they started playing. That is not the case anymore. And one thing that I certainly got out of this press conference is the Irish are really, really confident in themselves.
Yeah, there was a moment where Andy Farrell, the coach, said something, and I'm paraphrasing, where essentially, we know we're the best team in the world and we've been building up to this, and some of the players that followed him said similar things. They didn't exactly say, we don't believe in this aura of the All Blacks and we know that we can go out there and absolutely smack them up, but they know they're the best team. They're totally aware of it and they're absolutely confident in their own ability. That's a lot of what I picked up from the press conference. I mean, look at the results. It's like any team. You talk about Manchester United there. You can talk about Liverpool in the way they played in the 70s and the 80s and then the sudden drop-off.
It was only 30 years. 30 years of ignominy, pain and no titles. That's right. I
was only alive for about 15 of it. Where once the results drop, sure, you'll have this imagery for a while of a really good side, and they'll be like, oh, well, you never count out the All Blacks or never count out Manchester United. Yeah. But there will come a point where people go, well, actually you can, because the last 5, 6, 7 years or whatever, they haven't been that great. So I don't think any team out there at the World Cup right now fears the All Blacks at all. The only team that might is Argentina, because we beat them every year. Similar thing with the Wallabies if they were in the knockout phase. Maybe Fiji, because we steal their players all the time. But the likes of South Africa, France and Ireland, they have beaten us over the last 3-4 years, and Ireland beat us down there in New Zealand. And you've got South Africa, who killed us at Twickenham. And they're all looking there going, no, we've lost the last 2 tests to France. They're sitting there going, no, we've beaten this team. We know how to beat them, and we're not scared of them anymore. So they'll never give anything away. But there's no way that those guys, if they're sitting around a table, just the players and the coaches, or they're with their own mates, like they're in a circle and they're chilling out, having a couple of beers or whatever, and someone asks them, what do you reckon about the All Blacks? They go, no, we've got their number. We know it. We're better than them. We're going to beat them. They're not the All Blacks of old. This isn't the 2015 side. This isn't the Carters and the McCaws and the Ma'anunus and Conrad Smiths of the world, Kevin Mialamas and whatnot. This isn't that team. We can beat this team. They're a shell of what they used to be. I absolutely have no doubt whatsoever that these teams are sitting there thinking about that. And it also opens the door for someone like England or Wales, or to an extent maybe even Fiji, where they sit there and go, we're playing pretty well at this tournament. We've been in all right form, at least for the case of Fiji over the last year or so. If we were to come up against this All Black side, they don't look that good. Heck, we've got a chance.
We were outnumbered at that press conference today, 4-5, maybe 6-1 by Irish media. There was no one there, effectively, apart from those from New Zealand and those from Ireland. I didn't really notice any other media there. No. What does that mean?
Well, it was incredible. The number of Irish media is there. I've never seen it. My first ever All Blacks press conference, actually going to one, was yesterday. But when I saw the amount of people the All Blacks won yesterday, I thought, oh, here we go, there's a good chunk of people here, there's a couple of Irish people. The amount of Irish media. But what it says is that they are absolutely dialed in to their team's chances at this World Cup. There's a good friend of mine who works at a rival media company in New Zealand said that they are limiting who they're sending to the World Cup because they don't think the All Blacks are going to win, so they see it as a waste of money sending 3, 4, 5, 6 guys as opposed to just one or two.
Can we actually also just say that some of New Zealand's leading media companies have already told their people that are here that they are getting them out of here and actually preparing for them to leave next week.
They're seeing if it's cost efficient to get them out of France early. Than and then there's and a couple of them.
There ain't no street parade being planned in New Zealand.
Talking to a few of them yesterday who have accommodation and plane tickets booked for after the final, and yet their bosses back in New Zealand saying no, we're seeing if it's cheaper to fly you out after the quarterfinal because they're expecting that loss. So whereas with the Irish media, clearly they are buying into their chances, which they should because they're the best team in the world. They're on a 17-match winning run, which the record's like 18 set by us, wasn't it, in 2013 or something?
I get confused about this
because there was a Lithuania one.
Yeah,
for
that's
like
right. Yeah,
10 years
and
or
I think
something.
they won 350 games in a row, of course. And then there's North Korea, where Kim Il-jung, I think he led his team to 5,000 consecutive Test match victories.
Yeah. Oddly, they were playing the exact same team every single time, and it was the North Korean B-side.
Wasn't that crazy? I mean, I always remember there's a great story about him that every time he plays a round of golf, like he's like 1900 under par or something like that, and hits every hole in one. If we beat Ireland, are we officially, silly question here, but it's a great question as well, are we officially over the Wayne Barnes forward pass in 2007?
No, because I don't think that another win can ever sew up the wound of another devastating loss. I don't think that's a thing at all.
Wayne Barnes wasn't actually at fault. I know that, look, he became a scapegoat,
as
of
well.
course.
This was 16 years ago. He must have been in his 20s.
He was way out of his depth. He'd never reffed a game at that level before. He missed a blatant forward pass that the French scored a try off in the second half.
Happens a lot these days, by the way.
Well, it happens a lot in the NRL especially, does it not? But at the same time, we didn't score a point in the second half. I mean, you've got to remember that. And after that defeat in 2007, I think it was Richie McCaw, but might have been quoted afterwards saying, why didn't you kick a penalty? Why didn't you go for three? No, we're the All Blacks. We score tries. Yeah. Well, we didn't score a try. We had ample opportunities, but they don't. In the end, I don't think he awarded a penalty to them, in that second half. It was just bizarre. His performance was bizarre, but I don't blame him for that. We were the All Blacks. We were a much better team. We'd put 50 on France in Wellington earlier that year.
60.
60 was
60,
it?
I think.
We should have beaten them. There's no question about that. We just played a terrible game that day and got caught.
We're
pants
our
down.
own worst enemy. So, the forward pass was a way for Kiwis fans and perhaps those within the All Blacks to go, oh, well, we would have won if it wasn't for this. Yeah, but it's like, well, no, because this is a French team that had been ordinary at the tournament, ordinary that year. You're the All Blacks, you're the best team going to the tournament. You should have beaten them by 30 or 40 points, and they didn't. And they were ordinary in the day, and that's why they got knocked out. It wasn't because of Wayne Barnes.
One of the great things about sport is always stats and the peculiarity of them. Well, in 2015, these were the 4 quarterfinals. France versus New Zealand, we smacked up the French.
62-13.
Kano just belted the first guy hit in the first minute, and that set the tone. South Africa played Wales. The Yarpies won. We played them in one semi-final. Scotland played Australia. Now, that was where, was it Craig Joubert? Ran off the field afterwards.
He awarded a penalty when it wasn't a penalty, or caught someone offside and he wasn't.
The Scots feel they were robbed, but Aussie won that one. Ireland played Argentina, and Argentina won. So it was a clean sweep for the Southern Hemisphere nations. Well, in 2019, that wasn't quite the case. Japan played South Africa in one quarter, and Ireland played, or was it Wales played France in one quarter. So since 2015, it has happened again. There are now 4 Northern Hemisphere teams versus 4 Southern Hemisphere teams in these quarterfinals. Who comes out on top, and what does it actually mean for the power balance of international rugby if, God forbid, there's a clean sweep up this part of the world?
Well, and I actually think I think I said yesterday on the show that I think we went through all the games and I actually predicted all 4 Northern Hemisphere teams to win. Look, I mean, hypothetically, if South Africa didn't have France, they'd probably go through to the semis, but there's a great chance, if France would win, you've also got Ireland the favourites. England are probably the favourites against, who are England playing? Fiji. And fair to say Wales are probably the favourites against Argentina. So, look, what it suggests, and I think it leads more into this idea that the systems domestically, Australia's an absolute shambles.
I'm a basket case at the moment.
But for us, and you and I were saying this earlier today before we started the show, that the fruits or the lack thereof of our domestic competition are really showing at international level. We've been chopping and changing things with Super Rugby. The NPC's been completely disregarded for so long now that it's hurting our national side. We're not playing tough enough rugby outside of international windows, and I think it's showing. South Africa, on the other hand, of course, have changed this up where they've joined the Northern Hemisphere and joined those competitions, which are regarded as the best competitions in the world. And we're in a situation where, unless we're joining those leagues, or we're somehow managing...
We're putting our players up there.
Yeah, putting our players up. Not our teams, putting our players up.
This is going to be the biggest change in New Zealand rugby over the next 5 to 10 years. A realisation that if we want to compete, continue to compete, and get our players up to this level, then the rules are going to have to be relaxed, or they're going to have to be changed, or they're going to have to be adjusted. Maybe we actually introduced the 60 test thing, that once you played 60 tests for New Zealand, you can go overseas and can be selected. Something's going to have to change, because the reality of it is, and I keep reading it from Australian test players at the moment, that Super Rugby is a rubbish competition. That's essentially what it is. It's not competitive. And, Victor Vito on the program today, playing 10 months a year, playing 30-something hard games every year.
And what's expected of you when you join these teams.
Yeah, that's it. And yet, our players are rested and rotated. They can't play more than 4 games. And these are 4 games against teams from Australia that, the Blues are belting by 70 points. The Crusaders are putting 60 points on. It's like the All Blacks playing Namibia, Uruguay and Italy at the World Cup and thinking that we're actually going to get ourselves to
the preparation.
That's it. It's the parallels are just so there and seem so obvious, don't they? Of course, all of this is absolute nonsense if we turn around in the quarterfinals and we win and the Yarpies win and actually balance it up that way. But look, the grimness of the worst thing that can possibly happen here, knowing that in this part of the world, if they own it and they own all 4 semi-finalists, for example, where does that leave Southern Hemisphere rugby for 4 years, apart from in a wilderness of nothing?
Because we're the little dot at the bottom of the planet, as it is. Mm-hmm. It's the
only thing we got to cling to is that we beat them. Yeah, we beat them.
But this is the thing. We're not sitting here... This isn't like the last World Cup where we went against Ireland in the quarterfinal. As much as Ireland had beaten us the previous year, I think many people would have sat there and thought, no, the All Blacks should get the job done here, and we did. It's not like 2015 where we came up against France and killed them. Like in 07, for example, when France beat us, it was out of nowhere in a way, and it was such a shock because the All Blacks were the best team in the world. That's what this feels like now with the All Blacks in Ireland. We're not going into this going, no, the All Blacks have all the tools to win this, and if they lose, that's a surprise. We're sitting there going, Ireland we think will win because they're the better team. But they're the better team in every single facet. The form of the national side over the last how many years, their ability to beat the All Blacks on the road as well, and also we sit there, and at least I do, and I'm sure you're the same, where we admire their domestic competitions. The fact that they have this week in, week out hard-ass competition, whether you're in the English Premiership or you're playing, I think it's called the United Rugby Championship for the Irish, the Welsh and the South African teams that are in it. And then you've got the Champions Cup, which is obviously the Champions League version of their competition with the French. And you have all of these clubs all joining up. So you're playing intense hard-ass rugby all year long. And then you go to international level, you're playing in the Six Nations, a brilliant competition, and you're making each other better. And meanwhile, down south, we can't get our competitions, we can't get our ducks in the row in terms of our competitions. We've had South Africa happily leave us, and we sort of kicked them out of the door, but they wanted to leave anyway, which is stupid. And then the idea that we keep playing Australia and we'll make each other better is going to happen? Well, no, because we're both rubbish. It's like the formula for how to make it work is being done in this part of the world, and we're not doing it. And for whatever reason, I think New Zealand rugby is going to be incredibly stubborn and think, no, we can resurrect Super Rugby and make it all work. We don't need to go up there, and they're going to think that they're the mecca for international rugby for the way it has been for so long. It's not the case anymore. There's always been, since rugby went professional, there's always been something that has sort of buoyed New Zealand rugby, whether it's the national side, whether it's Super Rugby, or whether it's this part of the world not having the constant good form from their national sides. But right now, everything points, every element of rugby, high performance, grassroots, whatever it is, it feels like everything points to the Six Nations sides being just much better than the New Zealand sides.
Wow, which is why so much, ladies and gentlemen, is riding on this quarterfinal. The All Blacks with everything to play for, but more importantly than that, everything to prove Sunday morning New Zealand time.
Devlin. You better believe it! The platform.